The officer who killed an unarmed Akai Gurley in a Brooklyn stairwell was found guilty. We were live at the courthouse following all the drama last night. We've got reactions from the defense, the family, and the DA. Then Donald Trump, well, he's done it again. Sound familiar? Now he's weighing in on the Pope. Is nothing sacred to the Donald? I think we know the answer to that question. And also our conversation with a woman who lost her son at Sandy Hook Elementary School and how she's honoring her son's legacy and teaching children the social and emotional skills to hopefully forgo another tragedy. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And tonight we start with a police officer convicted of manslaughter and reaction from the major players in the case. A jury last night found Peter Liang guilty of manslaughter and official misconduct. Liang, as you know, shot Akai Gurley in a stairwell of a Brooklyn housing project a year and a half ago. He's now facing up to 15 years, and sentencing is scheduled for April. Liang, he has been terminated, and just today, Liang's partner, Sean Landau, he was fired from the NYPD. He received immunity in the case to testify against his then partner. Neither cop rushed to help Gurley after he'd been shot in the chest. Now, our own Dominic Carter, he was outside the courtroom all day yesterday. Dom, it was cold, but it was also a pretty stunning verdict given all the different cases we've heard. An officer in this case got a guilty verdict.
Indeed, that was the case, Richard. We spoke with Brooklyn DA Ken Thompson, the mother of Gurley's daughter, and also one of Mr. Liang's attorney. Let's start with the DA.
As to count one, charging the defendant, Peter Liang, with the crime of manslaughter in the second degree. What is your verdict?
Guilty.
Richard, the district attorney that brought the case walked up declaring there are no winners. And this was not about a political statement.
There's no message here. This has nothing to do with Ferguson or Staten Island or Baltimore or Cleveland or any other place. This has to do with who are we here in Brooklyn? What do we stand for? And what we stand for is we support our police officers. But when innocent men are shot and killed through an act of recklessness, we have to hold whoever is responsible accountable, whether that is a police officer or not. Out of everything we heard up until this trial, Akai Gurley, people didn't seem to understand that he was an innocent man who lost his life, who was a father, who was just simply trying to walk down the stairs to go home that night, and he was shot and killed. Everything was about other people and not about him. And so what this affirms is that his life mattered. The lives of people who live in public housing matters.
I saw you lean over and speak to his mother and even, I think, kiss her. And what did you say? What words were exchanged?
I'm sorry. She lost a son. And this is very important. Akai Gurley wasn't just some name that was pulled out of thin air and bantered about in that courtroom during this trial. He was an innocent man.
Now, here's Kimberly Bollinger, she the mother of Gurley's daughter.
Richard, family members were quick to respond, calling the actions of former police officer Peter Liang reckless, and they want jail time.
My daughter still is left without a father. I'm still left without my partner. It's still hard. Even though he was found guilty, it's still hard not having Akai here. This won't bring him back.
Can you describe how you feel tonight?
I have no idea how I feel right now. And yes, I do think he should go to jail. Everyone should go to jail for when they make a mistake. For when they do something and hurt someone, they should pay for their actions.
How tough has this been on you?
It's been very tough. Having to explain to a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old that their dad will not come back. It's hard.
Were you surprised and impressed with this jury in the sense that you've seen cops get charged with crimes in the past and it doesn't end this way? What was going through your mind that they carried this through to a conviction?
I was very impressed, very impressed. I thank the jurors so much for coming back with a guilty verdict. I just thank the DA. I thank everyone that dealt with this case, the people, everyone that dealt with this case.
I think, if anything, this should at least send a message to the citizens of New York that the criminal justice system does work. and that the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office has clearly shown to the citizens of this city that when a police officer does something wrong, they will be held accountable.
Now, for the other side, Dom last night spoke to Robert Brown, one of Officer Liang's defense attorneys.
Foreperson, please be seated.
Richard, one of Mr. Liang's lead lawyers in talking to us was already setting up a case for an appeal. Counselor, can you describe what it feels like tonight for you?
Anyone that sat in the courtroom would find it very hard to believe that he engaged in conduct that created a substantial risk of death. The bullet was clearly a ricochet shot, that it was an unjustified risk. You had a police officer that was going onto a roof landing in a public housing project addressing shootings in the pitch black. And if a police officer can't take his gun out at that point in time, then we're making it even a very difficult job, even more difficult for our police.
So what's next?
The next thing we'll do is make a motion to set aside the verdict, and then if that fails, an appeal.
Can you talk about how Officer Mr. Liang reacted when he heard the verdict?
I think everybody in court saw his reaction.
I was in the open.
Yeah, clearly he's very upset.
And so you're very surprised tonight?
I can't tell you how surprised I am. I mean, I'm sure my emotions right now aren't showing it, but it was pretty shocking. He didn't have the culpable mental state of recklessness in any way. There's no way that what he did was a substantial and unjustifiable risk and a gross deviation from the norm. We put about 12 witnesses on the stand that all said the same thing, that this is how they were trained. You know, clearly it's a terrible tragedy that Mr. Gurley died. A terrible tragedy, and my client feels terrible about it. But what he did wasn't a crime.
All right, let's bring in our panel right now. Republican strategist Bill O'Reilly joins us, as does Scott Vanderhoff, former 5-term Republican Rockland County executive, Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent, and of course, Dominic, who was there. You know, this was a tough one in that we've seen, or at least from my vantage point, from the Tamir Rice case to what happened certainly through different date lines in this country. There was a different narrative, which was there was a complete overreaction, or in certain perceptions, by police. And then there was, in this particular case, they put two rookies together in a rough housing complex. They're doing a vertical patrol. There's no lights on. Now, he violated his protocol by taking the gun out of his holster. I understand that. And apparently, and you heard some of this, part of the testimony they wanted to read back was the pressure needed to exert on the trigger because it's the safety in the trigger. So it wasn't like it was an accidental. But nonetheless, it had a ricochet twice before it killed Mr. Gurley. A tragic accident. Were you surprised, Dominic, that they came back with a guilty verdict?
Yes, I was. It's hard to get past the argument of this was a tragic, tragic, tragic accident. You mentioned that former Officer Liang, he's been terminated, and that his partner has been terminated by the NYPD this afternoon. But what the family requested that they wanted the partner fired. But what they also requested, Gurley's family, the vertical patrols that you've been talking about night after night, they have asked the NYPD for those vertical patrols as of tonight. That's the request tonight, to come to an end. Now, it may not happen, Richard, but they are very dangerous. Now, you know I grew up in the projects. I'm not going in those staircases at nighttime. It's very, very dangerous. I'm not excusing this officer's actions. One of the things, as we were, you know, it's one thing when you're sitting in the courtroom. And one thing that I was shocked by, I knew it was an Asian American judge hearing this case, but the amount of press from the Asian American community. There were about 125 journalists there yesterday all day long. I would say half of them happened to be Asian American. So this is a big story in the Asian American community.
A big part of this story, though, Dom, wasn't just what led up to, tragically, Mr. Liang discharging his weapon. It was what happened afterwards, and it was the order of the phone calls. And for the folks who don't remember, the first phone call that Officer Liang made wasn't to 911 to get the bus or the ambulance to get there. It was to his union rep. Then neither he nor his partner, which led to the termination of his partner, neither one used emergency actions to try and revive CPR or whatever at the time. To me, in many ways, the actions after that gun went off or as damning to Officer Liang as what led to him even pulling the trigger in the first place.
That's my contention of why Mr. Liang was convicted of manslaughter too. Mr. Liang and his partner not providing medical assistance for the friend of Mr. Gurley, the female friend, who had no idea basically what she's doing. There's blood everywhere. She's trying to do CPR, and you have the EMS person on the telephone trying to walk her through. As what's been reported, Officer Liang was more concerned about his job. It's my contention that had that not happened, he would not have been convicted.
And then it brings up the broader issue about policing going forward and some of the open-ended questions. You talk about vertical patrols. I thought it was even interesting, the head of the Sergeants Benevolent Association, Ed Mullen's comments today. He's not necessarily even opposed to this. Where does this go from here in terms of what is reasonable force? We still don't have a clear, there's shades of gray to this one, Bill. I don't know. I know each case is different, but that's part of this also in policing going forward.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, which is two rookies shouldn't be together in a public housing complex doing a vertical patrol.
And Bill, that last shooting where 2 cops were shot, again 2 rookies were put together that were still in a probationary period. I thought that went away after this tragedy a year and a half ago, apparently still in place.
I mean, NYPD, best in the world, you would think that things like this would have been fixed years ago. But 2 rookies going into a situation like that where it's dark, they're probably scared. I mean, it was such a tragedy. I mean, it shouldn't have happened. And I think Dominic's exactly right that had they immediately gone and tried to help the victim, he wouldn't have been convicted of manslaughter.
I can't help but look at it from the larger perspective with all the other cases that we've seen with Ferguson and Baltimore and Cleveland and the Garner case in Staten Island. And it seemed as though those cases, at least to me, felt more clear-cut, that the police officers overstepped their bounds and received no penalty in those cases. And yet in this one where there are the shades of gray and there are understandable pressures on all sides, and this is the one that winds up with the conviction. And so I just can't help but wonder if this doesn't confuse where we are with police and community relations even more.
I think you're 100% right. Certainly in the Tamir Rice case, when I saw that video, the idea that the cop had no culpability for that action versus what happened to Officer Liang, and I don't want to discount the poor Gurley family. They lost the son, they lost the father, they lost a partner out of this. But this was also tried, Scott, differently than in the past, which was since what we saw in Staten Island, New York changed its law, which was you could have an independent prosecutor and discretion was given to the Attorney General if he basically would take over the cases that were involved with police-related shootings. Instead, you saw the DA in Brooklyn say, I got this. I don't need the help of Albany. I'm going to pursue an indictment. And I think he acquitted himself very well in the press conference. Your question and answer with him, he said the right things. But nonetheless, I just felt, Scott, just as we took Donovan to task for clearly trying to punt and not seek a conviction when he went before in the Garner case, in this particular case, you could certainly argue the DA made it clear he wanted to convict this guy. Before, when he went to the grand jury, he's like, I'm going to get an indictment, don't worry. He did. It went to a trial. They presented the evidence. We know how it turned out, but it's interesting. This was really the first post-Garner case where it could have been handled differently as special prosecutor, and it wasn't. Are you comfortable with how the wheels of justice worked here?
Comfortable is the wrong word, I think, probably, but your point, all the points are well taken. It seems to me you have, what this really is an indictment of the training of rookie cops from beginning to end. Pulling out his pistol, going into the dark like that, wrong, okay? But it's always the cover-up. It's always the cover-up, trying to find, going to a union guy. And I'm thinking what the DA felt was, between that cover-up and the fact that he did this, and it's one shot, even though it's a ricochet shot, he was pretty sure for jury purposes, he had his conviction here. And I also think that's a lot of that, the back politics of it. Look, we're not African American. We're going to stand up. But this one was fairly clear. It's one bullet, one cop who didn't know what he was doing, even on a dangerous situation. I think it's a real indictment to the training, even with rookies. I mean, immediately you call 911, immediately you call somebody instead of trying to cover it up with a union rep.
I think it's also an indictment of New York City public housing, where you have police officers that scared to walk into a public housing facility. I mean, what about old ladies that live there? You know, I mean, that scared that you pull a gun in a hallway.
It's going to be really interesting, Dominic. I know that you've had many conversations with Pat Lynch, Mullins as well, and others. I was surprised I didn't hear as much vocal outrage on the union leadership on this one, especially given, as Andrew said, the facts of the case, which you could argue two different people could come to two different reasonable conclusions after hearing the evidence. But nonetheless, it'll be interesting how this all plays out. Thanks, Dom. All right. When we come back after this quick break here, we will pivot to the presidential race and take a look at the battle first between Bernie and Hillary. And last night, one would argue a strong debate performance for the secretary. How much momentum will it give her with Nevada and South Carolina coming up next?